The third bedroom, the one Victor, my husband, had always forbidden me to enter, now had its door open slightly. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, looking at the small gap. I had to look. I had to see what he was hiding. With shaking hands, I pushed the door wide open, and there he was. Victor lay in a coffin, his eyes closed, not moving at all. My heart pounded in my chest, louder than ever before. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The man I loved, the man who had been so kind and caring, was lying in a coffin in the middle of our home. I felt my hands shaking as I stood there staring. My mind raced with questions and fear. Why was he in a coffin? What was going on? I had to know, but I was too scared to move closer. The room was silent, only the sound of my breathing filling the air. This was not the Victor I thought I knew. Seeing him like this made my world turn upside down. Hi, my name is Noma, and this is my story. You're watching Midnight Shadows. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's get back to the story. It was at my best friend's wedding that I first met him. I was one of the bridesmaids, excited for my friend but not expecting to meet anyone special that day. As I stood by the altar, arranging my friend's veil, I glanced up and saw him. He was tall, with a confident yet gentle presence, and his eyes met mine with a warmth that made my heart skip a beat. After the ceremony, during the reception, he approached me with a smile. "Hi, I'm Victor," he said, extending his hand. "I couldn't help but notice you during the ceremony. You look so beautiful." I blushed, feeling a flutter of excitement. "I'm Noma. It's nice to meet you, Victor." We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, finding common interests and sharing stories. Victor was a successful businessman, deeply involved in charitable work. As the night went on, we danced under the stars, and it felt like a scene from a fairy tale. From that night, our connection grew stronger. Victor was generous with his time and money, supporting various causes, and always making people around him feel valued. He made me feel appreciated and loved, as any woman would want. As our relationship deepened, I introduced him to my family, and they adored him. He supported my siblings, paid for my sister and brother's university fees, and even helped my mom get a new house. He was someone we all needed and loved. After a year of dating, marriage seemed like the next natural step. Victor proposed to me during a surprise trip to Paris. It was a dream come true. We returned home and started preparing for the wedding. He handled the engagement party and dowry with grace and care, winning over my family even more. Our wedding was immaculate, a beautiful event that any woman would dream of. After the wedding, we went on our honeymoon, avoiding his house during this period, which I thought was strange. When we returned, Victor expressed his desire to move to a more welcoming house with enough space for us as a couple and for the children he had fathered in his previous marriage. His wife had passed on, and Victor did not like discussing the details of her passing, which I respected. We moved into a new mansion, a beautiful home. We furnished with new items we had looked at online during our honeymoon. I was thrilled. Our marriage was true bliss. Maybe it was the honeymoon phase. I do not know. Months passed, and all was well. There was only one thing that bothered me to no end. One of the bedrooms at the very far end of the hallway was Victor's prayer closet, or at least that is what he called it. Under no circumstances was I allowed to be near it. It was closed at all times, and sometimes I would try to open it, but it was always locked. There was something strange about the energy around that door. Every night before bed, Victor would excuse himself to go and pray. I often wondered why he never invited me to pray with him since we were now married. I felt a sadness each time he left, but I respected his wishes. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard something fall. I woke up from my sleep, and my husband was not in bed like he usually was at this time of night. My heart started to race. I got up, put on my robe, and picked up a bat from the closet. Quietly, I left the room, my grip tight around the bat. The hallway was dark and silent, except for a faint light coming from under the door of Victor's prayer room. I walked slowly, each step filled with dread. Maybe there was an intruder. I had to be careful. When I reached the door, I pushed it open with my bat. The door creaked as it swung wide, and there he was, my Victor, sleeping peacefully in a coffin. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a chill run down my back. I stared at him, my mind racing with confusion and fear. This was not the man I knew. Why was he in a coffin? What was happening? Victor looked so serene, as if he was in a deep, restful sleep. But the sight of him lying there in a coffin filled me with terror. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I took a step back, my legs trembling. I glanced around the room. It was filled with strange artifacts and ancient books. Candles were lit, casting dark shadows on the walls. Symbols I didn't recognize were drawn everywhere. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. I needed answers. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to the coffin. My hands shook as I reached out, but I pulled back, afraid to touch him. What was I supposed to do? Wake him? Confront him? Run away? A noise behind me made me jump. I spun around, but there was no one there. The house was silent again, but my heart was pounding in my ears. I turned back to Victor, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I had to know the truth. Gathering my courage, I called out his name softly. Victor? There was no response. I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Panic started to rise within me. Suddenly, Victor's eyes snapped open. I stumbled back, dropping the bat. He sat up slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the room filled with tension. Victor, what is this? I finally managed to whisper, my voice trembling. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Slowly, he got out of the coffin, standing tall and composed. Noma, I can explain, he said, his voice calm but firm. I shook my head, tears filling my eyes. Explain, how can you explain this? Why are you sleeping in a coffin? What is all this? I gestured wildly around the room. Victor took a step toward me, but I backed away. Please, just listen, he said softly. There are things about me you don't know, things I couldn't tell you, but I never meant to scare you. I felt a mix of anger and fear. You never meant to scare me? Victor, you're sleeping in a coffin. What am I supposed to think? He sighed, looking down for a moment before meeting my eyes again. This is part of who I am, Noma. A part of my past, my family's traditions. I didn't want you to find out this way. I was trembling all over. What kind of traditions involve sleeping in a coffin? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victor looked away, his face serious. It's a long story and not one I'm proud of, but it's something I have to do. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get out of there, away from the coffin, away from the strange symbols, away from him. I need some air, I said, my voice trembling. I turned and fled from the room, my heart pounding. I didn't stop until I was outside, the cold night air hitting my face. I took deep breaths, trying to calm down, but my mind was a mess of confusion and fear. What was happening to my life? The man I thought I knew was a stranger, hiding dark secrets. And now, I was left to figure out what to do next, how to handle this shocking truth. The night felt endless as I stood there grappling with the reality of my situation. My life had changed in an instant, and I had no idea what to do next. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. You can call me stupid, but I stayed with Victor. You must understand. Victor, he is a good man. He takes care of my family and me, which is more than I can ask for. But then there is the issue of his late first wife that I still do not have answers to. To be honest, guys, I love my husband. But is it possible to love someone you do not truly know? I'm not sure why I am sharing this story, as I have decided to stay. Maybe it's a cry for help. However, thank you for listening to my story. And that, my dear listeners, concludes today's story. If you have any advice for our guest, please share it in the comments section below. If you have a similar story you'd like to share, you can send it to us at the email on your screen. Until next time, beware of the shadows that linger in the night.